The colonies were at war with the British government, but with no clear unifying power and no central government, it was hard to get anything done. They decided to change that. The delegates were facing mounting pressure to present a face of unity against the British and establish a clear war plan. It was hard enough just to get states to convene. Up until that point, we were all just kind of winging it as individual states. And plan we did. We promoted George Washington as commander of the Continental Army and discussed plans for a union. I had just the solution. I had been working on a unity plan for nearly 20 years, first known as the Albany Plan. The Albany Plan was drafted by 7 northern colonies and unanimously approved by the delegates of the Albany Congress in July 1754. However, it was rejected by the legislatures of the colonies. But I realized all it needed was a bit of rebranding and a new name. I presented my idea of a centralized government to help fight the war. I called it the Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union. It was a riveting document, and you know the response? I, for one, thought it was a grand idea, just presented at the wrong time. Congress met again in 1776, still realizing they needed a plan for unity and support against the British Redcoats. John Dickinson, an unlikely loyalist, decided it was time to revisit the Articles of Confederation. You might not know my name as readily as Washington or Franklin, but I made some crucial impacts on the founding of our country. Ever heard of the name the United States of America? Yeah, that was my idea. Taking on parts of Franklin's original plan, Dickinson crafted a well-thought-out document that called for unity within a centralized government. I wanted representation based on the population of states, rights for everyone, and the ability to create strong foreign policy together as states. Many of these elements would eventually make its way into the U.S. Constitution, but at the time they weren't as popular. Jefferson and his gang decided to release the Declaration of Independence. What was independence if we didn't have a government to take its place? I refused to sign that awful document. He was a bit right in hindsight, but at the time we just wanted to stick it to King George so badly. It was preposterous. I decided I had had enough with Congress. I was off to the battlefield where maybe I could do some real good. After Dickinson left Congress, his Articles of Confederation were taken into consideration as a legitimate option. We just had to take a red pen to it first. It needed lots of revision. Rights for everyone? We had to cut that out. Centralized government? Finally, though, after much debate, the Articles of Confederation was approved by the Second Continental Congress on November 15, 1777. Turns out figuring out a whole new system of government isn't easy. We wanted to satisfy the state's needs, but also, continue the war. Each state had to ratify the Articles to make it binding and official. Congress gave a 3-month deadline. When news reached me that Congress had come to an agreement, I was thrilled. I badly needed money and resources to continue on and make it through the winter. General, we definitely had the power to help you, except not really. The Articles of Confederation gave Congress power to form an army, but not the power to tax states to pay for it. What in the world? I sent word to the Congress begging for help while my men froze in their boots. Congress was printing money endlessly, which made the dollar basically worthless. It was a rough few months in Valley Forge. Morale was low and Congress was absolutely of no help. We were going to lose because of our lack of central leadership. But even if the Articles had been strong enough to tax the states properly, there was another problem at hand. We had one holdout state, Maryland. All states needed to ratify the Articles. My beloved Virginia was the first to ratify it on December 16, 1777. By early 1779, Maryland was the final holdout. They had some valid concerns about land usage in the West. Virginia and several other colonies tried to argue that all the land between the Atlantic Ocean and Mississippi River belonged to them. Maryland felt that they were at a disadvantage and refused to ratify the Articles. They urged Congress to take control of the lands instead. Luckily, the great leader that I am, I managed to convince my fellow Virginians to give up some of our land to form new states when the time was right. Maryland was still uncertain, but was facing pressure from the French to ratify the Articles in exchange for help against the British troops. So after more than 3 years, on March 1, 1781, the Articles of Confederation were ratified. The last state, of course, was Maryland, who ratified it on February 2, 1781. All was well. I wouldn't say that. Because the Founding Fathers were concerned about tyranny of a centralized power, Congress and delegates had little control as a government. States had almost complete control over how to handle their affairs, and Congress only existed to serve as a bridge and judge for disputes among states. In short, the Articles had many shortcomings, like there was no national court system. There was no way for Congress to raise money through taxes. In fact, there was no way for Congress to enforce laws. Each state had one vote in Congress despite the size of the state. But at least we could establish a postal service, so a win for us, I think. Congress could maintain an army, but there was no way to fund the army because Congress couldn't levy taxes. Unfortunately, with mounting war debts, the Articles gave Congress no way to pay them back through taxes. They could create treaties and alliances with foreign powers, but couldn't enforce the specifics within the new country. Makes sense? Yes, states were supposed to contribute funding, for example, to Washington's army, but not surprisingly, they didn't. Congress was so weak that even delegates often refused to show up. This proved to be a problem, even when trying to sign a peace treaty to end the war. During its years as the guiding document, little happened on the federal level. Amendments to the Articles of Confederation required unanimous support, which was impossible to get, and citizens were starting to notice. Yet we had Shays Rebellions, where a group of farmers in Massachusetts, including the state militiamen, stormed the courthouse. But when the state government called upon Congress for military aid, none arrived. The uprising exemplified the many problems of the Articles, including a lack of central military and funding. So yes, why didn't Congress just amend the Articles? Well, that was a problem too. It needed unanimous consent from all delegates, so the delegates went back to the drawing board and drafted a new and improved Constitution in 1789. The Articles of Confederation would be critical in finalizing the final Constitution. In fact, without the Articles, the Constitution would never have been formed.